My name is Ethan Harper. I'm 34, a freelance investigative journalist based in Seattle. I dig into corporate corruption, expose environmental crimes, and occasionally freelance for high-profile magazines. I make a decent living, but to my in-laws, nothing I do counts as real work. Ever since I married Rebecca, the daughter of Victor and Marlene, I've felt like I'm auditioning for approval I'll never get. Victor is a high-powered real estate mogul. Marlene is the queen of social climbing. Both measure people by their net worth and their titles. They see my passion for truth and storytelling as reckless, irresponsible, almost dangerous. Our relationship with them has always been a performance. At every dinner, Victor critiques my career, asks how I plan to pay for a house, what benefits my freelance gig offers. Marlene hovers nearby, offering veiled compliments that feel more like traps than praise. "Such a brave career," she says, "but have you considered a safer path, something stable for our Rebecca?" Their favorite pastime is reminding Rebecca that she could have married someone more suitable, more conventional, more financially predictable. And yet, she married me. Last Thursday, I had spent a grueling week in Alaska photographing illegal logging operations for an exposé. My boots were caked in mud, my hands chapped, my lungs still filled with pine smoke. I called Rebecca when I landed. "Dinner at my parents' tonight," she said. Her voice was light, but I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest. Somehow, despite the evidence stacked against me, she believed her parents could treat me civilly for one evening. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that their smiles never reached their eyes, that I had always been an outsider in their world. We arrived at the Sunkla estate just as the sun dipped below the skyline. The house gleamed, all polished wood and marble floors, a temple to wealth and taste. Victor greeted me with a firm handshake that didn't hide his skepticism. "Back from your adventure, I see," he said, eyebrows raised, tone icy. Marlene was in the kitchen, orchestrating the table like a general preparing for battle. "Ethan, darling, we made something special for you," she said, smiling too brightly. She handed me a glass of a deep red cocktail, something garnished with exotic fruit, the aroma rich and intoxicating. Her hands shook slightly, hidden beneath the folds of her designer sleeves. Something about her movement felt off, too deliberate, too measured. I smiled, thanked her, and swapped my glass with Victor, as discreetly as possible. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. I had spent years learning to read people, to notice the subtle tells that reveal hidden intentions. 30 minutes later, Victor excused himself, pale, muttering about a sudden stomach ache, and rushed upstairs. Marlene froze, her eyes wide, her carefully maintained composure cracking. That was the moment I realized I hadn't misread the signs. This wasn't about hospitality or a special recipe. Rebecca met me in the kitchen, a mix of apology and worry in her eyes. "Mom, been tense lately," she said softly, touching my arm. "I don't know what came over her." I nodded, silent, letting her believe it was an accident. In truth, it was a deliberate act. And now I had to decide how to respond, not with panic, not with anger, but with precision. I've always believed in the power of evidence. That's why I kept my freelance work meticulous. Notes, recordings, contacts, documentation. I knew if I could gather proof, I could expose wrongdoing without losing control of the narrative. Over the next week, I quietly compiled what I could. Marlene's prescription medications, Victor's suspicious history with lawsuits against former employees, reports from neighbors who had witnessed unusual behavior. They all began to form a mosaic of manipulation and control. Meanwhile, Rebecca noticed the change in me. I spent nights in my studio, sifting through legal records, cross-referencing incidents, piecing together the puzzle. She asked me to take a break, to trust her to handle her family, but I couldn't. If I didn't act, their pattern would continue. It wasn't just about me. They had been trying to control every significant choice in her life for years. I remembered a story she'd told me about her college boyfriend, Daniel. A brilliant architect, a kind man. Her parents had systematically convinced her he was unworthy, sowing doubt with subtle lies and planted evidence. By the end of it, she believed she had chosen to end the relationship herself. Daniel had disappeared from her life, leaving her heartbroken and confused. Now I understood the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just jealousy over my career. It was a lifelong pattern of manipulation, grooming, and control. Their goal was never to welcome me into the family. It was to dominate, to shape Rebecca's life according to their vision. I reached out to several of Rebecca's old friends and ex-boyfriends. Most were hesitant to speak, fearing Victor's influence. But a few opened up, revealing consistent patterns: abrupt distancing, rumors planted, relationships sabotaged under the guise of parental concern. I documented everything: emails, text messages, photographs, and even a few recorded phone conversations. Slowly, the web became clear. Every move by Victor and Mullen followed a predictable logic: isolate Rebecca, control her choices, ensure her dependence on them. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a small thumb drive and a single note: "See for yourself." On the drive were video clips, security footage from the night of the dinner. I watched, heart pounding. There was Mullen reaching for a small vial, slipping it into a glass with precision. Victor drank it without hesitation, muttering a complaint about the sudden taste. The camera captured everything. And then, after we had left, Mullen and Victor arguing in their living room, discussing their plan to test me, to see if I was reliable, to determine whether Rebecca could be guided back to their path. I called the sender, a former neighbor of theirs named Lunda, who had faced similar manipulation years ago. She confirmed my fears. This was not an isolated incident. Rebecca's parents had repeatedly attempted to control family members, friends, and spouses. The patterns were chilling, precise, and consistent. I didn't tell Rebecca immediately. Instead, I started planning. I wanted to confront them, not with rage, but with undeniable evidence, leaving no room for denial. I needed their faces to reflect the truth of their actions, to force accountability without losing the moral high ground. I began compiling a presentation: the videos, emails, testimonies, and a timeline showing years of manipulation. I contacted Daniel, Rebecca's college ex, who reluctantly provided correspondence proving the systematic undermining of their relationship. Other friends followed suit, confirming similar patterns. It took nearly a month, but the evidence was airtight. When I finally told Rebecca, her reaction was a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. She had loved them despite everything, wanted to believe the best. Seeing the videos, reading the emails, and hearing the stories shattered the image she had held for decades. And yet, she didn't doubt me. She trusted the truth I brought, and slowly, her resolve hardened. The night we decided to confront them, we weren't alone. Daniel and Linda joined, two of the people most directly affected by Victor and Marlene's manipulations. We entered the Sinclair estate, our laptops and cameras in hand. Victor greeted me with his usual confidence, a smug smile that faltered the moment he saw the equipment. Marlene tried to hide her anxiety behind a smile, offering a drink. I declined, setting up the camera to record the encounter. "This is a family discussion," Marlene said, her voice sharp. "Exactly," I replied, voice calm but firm. "Family, and family deserves the truth." For the next 2 hours, we laid everything bare: the tampered drink, the manipulation of past relationships, the consistent pattern of controlling behavior. Victor denied, argued, tried to twist the narrative, but each denial was met with proof: emails, video clips, corroborating testimonies. The color drained from their faces. Marlene's voice trembled. Victor's arrogance faltered. For the first time, they were faced with the undeniable consequences of their actions. Rebecca stood tall beside me, her eyes bright with tears but unwavering. "I love you both," she said, "but I will no longer allow you to control my life." The room fell silent. Even Victor struggled to find words, while Marlene's hands shook as she tried to compose herself. By the end of the night, boundaries were clear. We left the Sinclair estate with a sense of justice, not vengeance. Evidence remained in their possession, a warning that any further attempts to manipulate would be documented and shared with those who needed to know. The balance had shifted. For the first time, Rebecca and I were free to live our lives without fear of covert interference. The days after the confrontation were tense, but strangely liberating. Rebecca and I had set firm boundaries. Victor and Marlene didn't call, didn't text, and for once we didn't care. For the first time in years, we felt the air of freedom without the constant shadow of their judgment. Yet, I knew better than to think they had disappeared entirely. Controlling people don't just vanish. They regroup, strategize, and wait for an opening. Sure enough, a week later, a text appeared on Rebecca's phone from Marlene. "Darling, we should talk. Can we come over tomorrow?" Rebecca showed it to me, her fingers trembling. "I don't know if I can trust them, Ethan," she said quietly. I nodded. "We don't have to invite them in," I said, "but we do need to be ready. They won't stop trying." That evening we prepared. I set up my camera again, this time in the living room where any conversation would happen. Rebecca's laptop was nearby. All messages, all calls would be recorded. The goal wasn't revenge. It was documentation, a safeguard against manipulation. Marlene and Victor arrived the next day, dressed impeccably, exuding charm that felt manufactured. Marlene smiled tightly. Victor's handshake was firm, but something in their eyes betrayed unease. They knew they were no longer in full control. "Ethan," Victor said smoothly, "we just want to clear the air. There's been a lot of misunderstanding." "Then let's start there," I replied calmly, gesturing toward the camera. "Everything is being documented." Marlene's lips pressed into a thin line. "Documented? Ethan, this is unnecessary. We're your family." "Family protects each other," I said, voice steady. "Not undermines them, and now we have evidence." I watched their faces flicker between irritation and panic. Victor's jaw tightened. Marlene tried to mask her reaction, but her hands shook slightly as she reached for her handbag, a futile attempt at composure. I began with the drink incident, showing the footage of Marlene slipping something into Victor's glass. Their reactions were subtle. Victor went pale, Marlene's eyes widened, and for the first time their usual confidence faltered. "This was a test," Victor said quickly, attempting to deflect. "You drink, you survive. It was harmless, Ethan. A momentary lapse in judgment." I didn't flinch. "A test? You tried to poison me. That's not a lapse, Victor. That's deliberate, and you know it. Do you really expect me to forget that?" Marlene opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "No, Marlene, you don't get to explain this away. Not now, not ever." Then I brought up Daniel, Rebecca's college ex. Emails, screenshots, messages, all evidence of how they systematically undermined that relationship. Victor tried to laugh it off, claiming misunderstandings, while Marlene insisted that Daniel had been unsuitable, and it was for Rebecca's own good. But each claim crumbled under the weight of proof. Rebecca watched silently, absorbing everything. Her expression was a mixture of disbelief and rage. "I can't believe you," she said finally, voice trembling. "All these years you've controlled me, shaped my life, convinced me to doubt my own choices. All for what? Your idea of perfection." Victor's face hardened. "Rebecca, listen." "I'm done listening to lies," she interrupted. "I'm done letting you decide what's best for me. Ethan and I will make our own choices, all of them." Marlene's lips quivered, but no tears came. She realized finally that her influence was slipping. Victor's shoulders sagged, a sign of defeated authority. They had underestimated us, underestimated my ability to gather proof, and most importantly, underestimated Rebecca's strength. Then Victor tried one last move. "Ethan," he said, leaning forward, "we want to make amends. Let us help you. Let us invest in your career. We can give you opportunities, connections you couldn't reach on your own." I smiled thinly, refusing the glass of wine he offered. "You can't buy integrity, Victor. You can't buy my respect. And you definitely can't buy Rebecca's love. That's earned, not handed over in a check or a networking opportunity." Marlene sniffled, her charm completely shattered. "We just want what's best." "For you, not for us," Rebecca said firmly. "That's the difference. I love you both, but I refuse to let you dictate my life anymore." The meeting ended with a tense quiet. They left without further protest, but I knew this was only the beginning of a longer journey. Control like theirs doesn't vanish overnight. But for the first time, the rules had changed. Rebecca and I were united, armed with evidence and clarity. Over the following months, we began rebuilding. Ethan Harper wasn't just a journalist. I became a chronicler of their manipulation, a shield against further interference. Each decision we made, we documented. Each encounter with Victor and Marlene was either recorded or witnessed. Slowly, Rebecca regained her confidence, reclaiming the autonomy that had been eroded over decades. Then a new twist appeared. Marlene reached out to Rebecca again, claiming that Victor had been diagnosed with a serious health condition and needed family support. Rebecca hesitated, torn between empathy and the lessons she had learned. I encouraged caution. "Help him if you must, but don't let them manipulate you again," I said. We visited them together, setting firm boundaries. This time, I carried my camera openly, documenting interactions. Marlene attempted her usual tactics, compliments veiled as criticism, subtle guilt, but the camera caught it all. Victor tried to regain control, but the presence of evidence and witnesses neutralized him. Through it all, Rebecca grew stronger. She realized that love doesn't mean submission. Family doesn't mean control. She could care for her parents without surrendering her autonomy. That was a lesson she had never truly understood until the confrontation. By the next holiday season, the Sunklas reached out with a tentative invitation for dinner. We agreed, but with rules. No manipulation, no gifts with strings attached, no discussions about suitable careers or partners. They arrived, and for the first time, the evening passed without tension. Victor asked about my investigative work with genuine curiosity. Marlene complimented Rebecca's recent achievements without adding any qualifiers or criticisms. It felt almost surreal, a fragile truce built on accountability and respect. During dinner, Victor leaned toward me quietly. "You've handled everything remarkably. I didn't expect this," he said. I nodded. "I've handled it because my life, my marriage, and my dignity are non-negotiable." He exhaled slowly, a hint of respect finally breaking through his rigid demeanor. Marlene gave Rebecca a warm smile, not the forced one she usually wore. It was tentative, but it was real. That night as we left the Sunkla estate, Rebecca held my hand tightly. "I feel free," she whispered. "I finally feel like I can breathe." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "You were always free," I said. "You just needed to see the truth for yourself." Weeks turned into months. We continued our work, traveling, documenting, and building our life together. The Sunklas maintained a cautious distance, but we no longer feared their interference. And when Marlene once again tried to subtly criticize my career during a phone call, I simply smiled and said, "We're happy. That's enough." Silence followed. The power dynamic had shifted. Then the ultimate affirmation came. Rebecca and I discovered we were expecting our first child. The news was ours to share, ours to celebrate, and no one else could control how we reacted. We informed the Sunklas cautiously, prepared for reaction. Victor smiled, Marlene teared up, but this time it was genuine, not a tool of manipulation. For the first time, we had reclaimed joy on our own terms. Looking back, the drink, the tampered glass, the subtle sabotage, it all seemed like a distant storm we had weathered. What mattered was that we had emerged intact, stronger than ever, bonded not just by love but by shared resolve and understanding. Control had been challenged, lies exposed, and freedom reclaimed. And as we prepared to welcome our child, we knew one thing: no one could dictate our lives ever again.